She didn't let go of my hand for the rest of that night. Not when her ex walked away, not when the song changed, not even when I made a joke about it being time to let go, because honestly, my hand was going numb. I didn't know it yet, but that was the night I met the woman I'd end up building a life with. And it almost didn't happen, because 3 months later, I nearly lost her over something stupid I said at a party. And for about 2 weeks, I genuinely didn't know if she was going to forgive me for it. Let me back up. 11 minutes before any of this happened, I was standing by the appetizer table at my cousin Mark's wedding, holding a drink I wasn't really drinking, wondering how fast I could leave without my mother finding out. I'd been through my own breakup 8 months earlier. Nothing dramatic, no cheating, no blow-up, just two people who ran out of reasons to stay together. The kind of ending that doesn't give you anything to be angry about, which somehow makes it harder to move past. Weddings, that year, had become something I dreaded. 2 hours of happy couples, an open bar, and someone's aunt asking if I was seeing anyone yet. The vineyard itself was the kind of place that makes even a reluctant guest soften a little. Rows of grapevines under a sky just starting to go orange. String lights crossing the stone patio. A band working through covers of songs from 30 years ago. I told myself I'd stay through dinner and slip out before the dancing really started. I had a whole exit planned. I even knew where I'd parked. So I planted myself near the bar, half listening to a stranger talk about his fantasy football league, mentally already in my car. Then a woman I'd never seen before walked straight up to me, fast, eyes a little wild. "Hi," she said. "I know this sounds insane. My ex just walked in. I need you to pretend to be my husband for 20 minutes. I looked past her. A tall guy in a blazer was scanning the room like he owned it. "Okay," I said. "I'm in." She grabbed my hand before I'd even finished the sentence. Not a handshake. A full, deliberate handhold, fingers laced through mine. "I'm Emily," she said. "Play along. He's looking over here." For 20 minutes, Emily and I ran a full improvised bit with an audience of exactly one bitter ex-boyfriend named Connor. She kept her hand in mine the entire time. "Laugh again, he's still watching. Put your hand on my back, husbands do that." I followed instructions like an actor handed his one line 5 seconds before curtain. At one point, she introduced me to 2 of her college friends who'd wandered over, and I watched her deploy the same fictional 4-month marriage with a confidence that genuinely impressed me. Full details, a fake honeymoon destination, a joke about my supposed inability to load a dishwasher correctly. I played along, adding details I made up on the spot, and somewhere in the middle of that performance, I stopped feeling like I was doing her a favor and started feeling like we were, genuinely, a team running a con together, and it was, against every expectation I'd walked in with, kind of fun. Then Connor actually walked over. "Emily," he said, "didn't expect to see you here." "Small world," she said, voice perfectly flat. "This is my husband, Jake." I shook his hand. Watched something flicker across his face, disbelief, mostly, and something colder underneath it. "Husband," he repeated. "When did that happen?" 4 months ago, Emily said, without blinking. "Small ceremony. Close family only." He looked down, at her hand, at the ring finger that had nothing on it, because none of this had existed 90 seconds earlier. I felt my stomach drop. If he called that out right now, in front of everyone, this whole thing fell apart, and Emily would be standing there exposed in a way that was worse than if she'd never tried the lie at all. He didn't say anything about it. Whatever he was looking for, he decided not to find it. "Congrats," he said, in a tone that meant the opposite, and walked off toward the bar. Emily didn't let go of my hand for a long moment after he disappeared. I felt her whole body unclench, degree by degree. "Thank you," she said. "You didn't have to do that." "You looked like you needed backup," I said. "Also, 4 months in, already saying when you know you know. I should be in movies." She laughed, real, surprised out of her. And I want to be honest with you. In that moment, I thought this was where the story ended. A funny thing to tell at parties. I had no idea she still hadn't let go of my hand, and neither had I. We ended up at a table near the dance floor, still not sure how we'd gotten there. "Tell me the real story," I said. Because small ceremony, close family, was a suspiciously specific lie for something you made up in 2 seconds. "Connor and I dated almost 2 years, she said. "He cheated. It took me the better part of a year to feel normal again. Every time I've run into him since, he's had some new girlfriend on his arm, and I've been standing there alone, and I could see it in his face. That little flicker of satisfaction. I told myself if I ever saw him again, I wasn't going to be the sad single girl by the appetizers one more time. So you grabbed the nearest stranger, I said. I grabbed the nearest stranger who looked like he wouldn't panic and blow my cover, she corrected. Real gamble, for the record. You could have just stared at me like I was insane. I considered it. For half a second. She told me she worked as a physical therapist, that she'd almost skipped this wedding too, for different reasons than mine. At some point, the conversation stopped being about Connor entirely and just became two people who liked talking to each other. Can I tell you something a little embarrassing? She said. When I spotted you at the bar, before I even walked over, part of why I picked you specifically is you looked kind. Not just available, kind. I don't know how else to explain it. I'm choosing to take that as a compliment, I said, even though I've just learned my face does something I wasn't aware of. She looked down. Our hands were still laced together on the table. Neither of us had let go since Connor walked away. We're still doing the married couple thing, she said, half embarrassed. I don't mind. Neither do I. We stayed at that table long after most people had migrated to the dance floor, long after the cake had been cut and the bouquet thrown, long enough that Mark's new wife eventually wandered over to ask, laughing, if I'd abandoned the rest of my family entirely for a stranger in a green dress. I introduced Emily as a friend of the maid of honor, which felt technically true and completely inadequate at the same time. Can I ask you something else? Emily said, once we were alone again. Why'd you actually say yes? Back at the bar, you didn't know me. You could have just said that's not really my thing and gone back to your drink. I thought about it for a second, because I wanted to give her a real answer, not just something that sounded good. Honestly, I think I recognize the look on your face, I said. Not the panic exactly. The specific kind of dread that comes from not wanting someone to see you standing alone one more time. I've had that exact feeling at other people's weddings. I figured, if I could do something small to help someone skip that particular flavor of misery for 20 minutes, why wouldn't I? She was quiet for a second. That's a genuinely good answer. I was expecting something more like, you looked hot in the green dress. That's also true, I said, but I figured I'd lead with the version that made me sound like a better person. She laughed, loud enough that a couple at the next table glanced over, and I remember thinking, even then, that I wanted to hear that specific laugh again as many times as I possibly could. I'd love to tell you this turned romantic right there on the dance floor. It didn't. What actually happened was slower and more real, which is exactly why it stuck with me. We traded numbers before the night ended. Casual, low stakes, the kind of exchange you have with someone you liked but weren't sure would go anywhere. 2 weeks later, she texted me. Random, Connor texted me today, first time in months. Someone at the wedding told him I got married. I think he was fishing to see if it was true. What'd you say? I wrote back. Said thank you. Didn't correct him. Bold strategy. Guess I'm still your husband. Guess you are. Problem? Not even a little. 3 weeks in, at almost 11 at night, she texted. Told my sister the wedding story today. She said it sounds like the start of a movie. I told her real life doesn't work like that. She said you don't know that yet. Anyway, good night, husband. I stared at that message longer than I'd like to admit. Good night, I wrote back. Tell your sister we'll see. There was another exchange, a few days after that I've thought about more than I probably should. She sent a photo, no caption, just an image, of the wedding invitation still sitting on her kitchen counter, the one from Mark's wedding. Months old at that point, still not thrown away. Why do you still have that? I wrote. Not sure. She wrote back. Kept meaning to toss it. Guess some part of me wanted proof it actually happened, in case future me needed convincing this wasn't a weird dream I had. For the record, I can also confirm it happened. I still have the receipt from the drink I never finished. You kept the receipt? No, but I would have, if I'd thought of it in time. Hindsight. She sent back a single laughing emoji, and then, a minute later, I'm glad it wasn't a dream. Me too. I wrote, and meant it more than the casual pace of the conversation probably led on. A month after the wedding, I asked her to dinner. A real one. She said yes almost immediately, which surprised me more than it should have. Here's the part where this stopped being a cute story and became something I could actually screw up. 6 weeks into real dating, dinners, weekend plans, meeting each other's friends, we were at a birthday gathering, and one of Emily's old college friends asked how we'd met. I told it the way you tell a story at a party, for laughs, leaned all the way into the absurdity, got a good reaction from the room, Felt pretty pleased with myself. I didn't notice Emily had gone quiet until we were in the car. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah," she said, in the tone that means the opposite. I pushed, gently, until she told me the truth. When you tell it like that, for laughs, it makes it sound like the whole thing was a gimmick. And I know it started that way, technically. But that night mattered to me, for reasons that had nothing to do with Connor. I was in a rough place that whole year. Still doubting whether people actually wanted to be around me or just felt sorry for me. And you staying after the pretending was already over, talking to me for hours. That meant something real. Hearing you turn it into a party punchline made me wonder if it meant the same thing to you at all. I sat with that before answering, because I didn't want to smooth it over. "You're right," I said. "I told it like a party trick, because it's an easy laugh, and I wasn't thinking about how that would land on your end. But it wasn't a bit to me either. Not even that first night. I remember exactly what it felt like when Connor walked away and you didn't let go of my hand. I've thought about that more than I've admitted. She didn't say anything for 2 blocks. I genuinely didn't know which way this was going to break." "Thank you for saying that, seriously," she finally said. I needed to hear it outside of a crowded room. "Then let me say it again, seriously," I said, pulling the car over, because it felt wrong to say this half-focused on traffic. That night wasn't funny to me. It was the night I met someone I wanted to keep talking to, long after the reason to talk had already disappeared. "I've liked you since about minute 12, somewhere between the fake handshake and the real one." She laughed, finally, and took my hand, a small, deliberate echo of that first night. "Minute 12, that's oddly specific." "I was counting," I said. "I had nothing else to do. I was busy pretending to be your husband." I called my best friend Tom the next day, mostly because I needed to talk through what had happened with someone who wasn't directly involved. I told him the whole thing, the party, the joke, the quiet car ride, the conversation on the side of the road. "You know what that actually was, right?" Tom said, in the blunt way he says most things. "That wasn't her being sensitive about a joke. That was her telling you this thing mattered to her, and giving you a chance to prove it mattered to you too. Sounds like you passed." "I don't know if I passed. I know I almost failed the pop quiz before I even knew it was happening." "Almost failing and actually failing are different things," he said. "Most guys wouldn't have pulled the car over. Most guys would have said sorry, it was just a joke, and moved on and never thought about it again. You clearly thought about it. That's the part that matters." I've held on to that conversation, honestly, more than I expected to at the time. It's easy, when you're in the middle of a relationship still finding its shape, to assume every disagreement is a crack in the foundation. Tom was right that this one wasn't. It was closer to a stress test, the kind that tells you, early, whether the thing you're building can hold weight before you've put too much on top of it to check safely. That conversation almost broke us, 2 weeks after it started to feel real. I think about that more than almost anything else from that year. How close a good story can come to erasing the true one underneath it, if you're not careful with how you tell it. About a week after that conversation in the car, something happened that I didn't find out about until much later. And honestly, when Emily finally told me, my stomach dropped in a way it hadn't since the moment Connor walked toward us at the wedding. Connor had messaged her, not the casual, wanted to reach out and wish you well text from before. A real message, long. The kind of message someone writes after seeing a person they used to love standing next to someone else, holding hands, looking happy. The kind that makes an ex reconsider everything they thought they'd moved past. He told her he'd made a mistake, that seeing her at the wedding had wrecked him more than he expected, that he'd been thinking about her constantly since, that the guy she was with now was clearly a nice guy, but nice wasn't the same as right, and didn't she remember what they used to have before things fell apart? He asked if she'd get coffee with him, just to talk, no pressure. Emily didn't tell me about it right away. She told me later that she needed a few days to figure out how she actually felt before she brought it to me, because she didn't want to hand me her confusion and make it my job to resolve it for her. I won't pretend that didn't scare me, hearing it after the fact. 2 years is a long time. First loves, or close to it, don't just evaporate because the ending was ugly. Sometimes the ugliness is exactly why the good parts get remembered brighter than they actually were. I've seen it happen to friends. The ex who reappears at exactly the wrong, or right, moment, and suddenly 2 years of history outweighs 2 months of something new and still fragile. She told me all of this on a Sunday afternoon, sitting across from me at my kitchen table, and I remember the specific fear of watching her get the words out slowly, like she was choosing each one carefully. "I didn't answer him for 4 days," she said. "I want you to know that." I wasn't hiding it from you to protect him. I was trying to figure out why any part of me even hesitated before deleting it. And why did you hesitate? I asked. Because I needed to know, even if the answer scared me. Because for 2 years, he was the person I built my whole life around, and some small, stupid part of me wanted to know if the version of him who wrote that message was real, or if it was just what people say when they see something they can't have anymore. I needed to know it wasn't about you. It was about closing a door I never actually got to close myself. Because he's the one who ended things, not me. So what did you decide? I decided I didn't need coffee to close it, she said. I wrote back one line, told him I hoped he found what he was looking for, and that I already had. Then I blocked his number, because closure doesn't require an ongoing conversation, and I was done needing his validation to know my life had turned out fine without him. I sat with that for a long moment. Why didn't you tell me right when it happened? Because I wanted to bring you a decision, not a dilemma, she said. I didn't want you spending 4 days wondering if I was going to choose him. I already knew the answer. I just needed a few days to understand why the question even landed for a second in the first place. I'd be lying if I said that conversation didn't shake something loose in me. Up until that point, this had felt, on some level, like a story with a foregone conclusion. The fake marriage, the wedding, the second run-in at the grocery store, all of it building toward an ending I assumed was inevitable. Hearing that Emily had actually sat with the question of going back to him, even for 4 days, even for reasons that had nothing to do with me directly, reminded me that none of this had ever been guaranteed. People choose each other, every day, in small and large ways. And she'd chosen me, deliberately, with her eyes open, not because the alternative had disappeared, but because she'd looked directly at it and decided against it anyway. I asked her eventually what it was that made the decision clear once she actually sat down and thought it through. It wasn't one big thing, she said. It was that when I imagined getting coffee with him, all I could picture was rehashing the past, and when I thought about coming home to tell you about my day, I could picture the actual future. That's it. That's the whole difference. One of those felt like closing a loop. The other felt like building something. I didn't need 4 days to know which one I wanted. I needed 4 days to be sure I wasn't choosing you just because it was easier, or safer, or because I was scared of being alone again. I wanted to know it was really you I wanted, not just the absence of him. And now you know? Now I know, she said. For what it's worth, I said, I'm glad you told me, even though it terrified me for about 30 seconds. Only 30 seconds, she said, a small smile breaking through. Give or take, I said. I recovered quickly. I have a very good poker face. You really don't, she said, laughing now. You went white as a sheet. Fine. It was more like 2 minutes. She reached across the table and took my hand. Not a performance this time, not for anyone watching, just the two of us in my kitchen on an ordinary Sunday. And it felt like the most honest version of that same gesture from the wedding 6 months earlier, the one that had started as a costume and had, somewhere along the way, become the truest thing about us. 3 months into actually dating, we ran into Connor again. Not a wedding this time, a grocery store, on an ordinary Tuesday, both of us in sweatpants. I saw him first. Same posture, same confidence. I felt Emily tense beside me. Want me to grab your hand again? I asked. She looked at me, and something had changed since the wedding. No panic this time. Yeah, she said, but not because I'm pretending. Connor spotted us. His eyes went straight to our hands, then to Emily's face, then to mine. So the husband thing, he said, that's real, then? Emily looked up at me before answering. It's real. Not married yet, but real. He muttered something about needing to grab a few things and disappeared down the cereal aisle faster than the moment required. I can't believe that happened twice, Emily said, laughing. We finished shopping like nothing had happened, wandering the aisles the way you do when a small, strange moment has just shifted something, and neither person wants to name it out loud yet. In the checkout line, she leaned her head against my shoulder, unprompted, and said, quiet, almost to herself. I used to hate running into him. Every single time, for over a year, it wrecked my whole week. Just now it barely registered. I think that's because of you. Not because you said the right things. Just because I wasn't standing there alone anymore, bracing for what he might see. I'm glad I could be useful, I said, half joking. You're more than useful, she said. No joke in it at all. I don't think I've said that clearly enough. So I'm saying it now. I didn't have a clever response. I just put my arm around her in the checkout line, in front of a bored cashier and a stranger buying an alarming amount of frozen pizza, and let the moment be exactly as ordinary and as significant as it actually was. "Third time's the charm," I said, once we were back in the car. "Maybe next time it's at our actual wedding. He can really lose it." She went quiet. I worried I'd pushed too far, too soon. Then she smiled. Slow, genuine, a little shy. I wouldn't hate that, actually. It's been almost a year since that wedding. Emily and I are still together. Not performed, not for anyone's benefit. We still laugh about that first night more than anything else in our relationship. A stranger by the appetizer table. A hand grabbed out of desperation. A 20-minute bit that nearly didn't survive its own punchline 3 months later. Here's what I actually believe now. The story you tell about how you met someone matters less than what you build after. It started as a favor. It started as a lie for an audience of one bitter ex-boyfriend. But the late-night texts, the parked car conversation that almost ended it, the second grocery run where neither of us had to pretend, that part was real from the start, even before either of us was ready to say so. If I'd said no that night, told myself the whole thing was too strange for a wedding I didn't even want to attend, I'd have finished my drink, made small talk about fantasy football, and driven home having learned nothing about anyone. It's strange, realizing how much can hinge on one decision to say yes to something that made no sense in the moment. I think about the 4 days she sat with Connor's message too. Not because I doubt what she chose. I don't, not for a second. But because it taught me something about what real commitment actually looks like. It isn't the absence of other options. It's choosing the same person again, deliberately, even when an old door swings back open and some small part of you is curious enough to glance at it. She looked. She chose me anyway. That matters more to me than if the door had never opened at all, because it means what we have wasn't built on the absence of alternatives. It was built on her picking this, specifically, on purpose, more than once. Sometimes the people who end up mattering most walk in through the side door, uninvited, in the middle of a crisis that has nothing to do with you. And they stay long after the reason for the door opening has disappeared completely. And sometimes, months later, an old door creaks open again, and the person you love has to choose you all over, in private, with nobody watching and nothing to perform. She grabbed my hand because she needed a stranger for 20 minutes. She kept holding it because, somewhere in those 20 minutes, I stopped being a stranger. And she's still holding it now, not because anyone's watching, but because she wants to. If this one got you, tell me in the comments. And if you want the next real story like this, subscribe. New one every week.